get started here shortly. We're going to give just a few more minutes for some latecomers to join on. Happy Wednesday and happy Wine Wednesday. We are privileged to have Phil and Jeff joining us from Robert Sinskey Vineyards out in California, and we are super excited to have them. And I just wanted to run through the lineup real quick for those of you who are getting everything ready. We're going to start with the Abraxas, and then we're going to move to the Pinot Blanc, and then we're going to go to the Pinot Noir, and then the POV Red Blend, and that'll be our order for this evening. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat function, and we will try to moderate them as best as possible to keep the flow of the tasting going. And then at the very end, be thinking about what your favorite wine is from this lineup, because we will be taking a poll to see what the winner of the tasting is. So without further ado, actually, we're going to wait just one more minute, guys, just to have some latecomers come on board. And while we're waiting for them, I want to ask you both a question, which is, what is the best Robert Sinskey wine that you've enjoyed in the last 6 months?
Oh, the last 6 months. All of them?
You can't cop out with that, Phil.
Look, I'm going to jump in with an answer. By the way, if anybody out there has been waiting for some sort of ceremonious beginning to the wine, we've already cracked our bottles open. They're already in glass. So let's get started. Drink up.
This 15 at Abraxas is a good start.
We make a small production Merlot. And one of the perks about being part of the sandbox here is that every time we release a wine club wine, we take 2 bottles ourselves for everybody on the staff. And this 2015 Merlot I brought home, and he doesn't need any bigger an ego than he already has, but I managed to text him on that one saying, we've achieved better than mediocre, finally. It's exceptional. The 2015s, you're going to see it soon when we get into POVs. There's just something about them from aromatic intensity. I mean, it's a drought year, and this Merlot was pretty striking. So that's my answer, and I feel pretty good about that one.
I'm going to say the 2006 SLD. It's one of those wines that it was tight as nails at release, and so as it's evolved in the glass, it's just really turned great corners, beautiful acidity, nice balance, nice integration of the wood with the fruit, and it's not super cloying. It's a very food-friendly wine, and still got a long way to go.
Nice. And for those of you who don't know, the moniker SLV is Stag's Leap Vineyards. It is a tiny production wine that they were just telling us may not be coming back around again until 2025 vintage because of past fires. If you're not on their wine club mailing list, you should be on their wine club mailing list, because that is a wine that we very rarely see in the state of Georgia as well from a retail standpoint. So they have also that 2015 Merlot that Phil was talking about. Those are wines that we can't currently get you, but you can get directly through them, through the website and through the vineyards. So I think that we've stalled long enough for any latecomers. Look at this picture of Jeff without the goatee. So this is Jeff and Phil from Robert Sinskey Vineyards, one of our favorites in the store, one of my epiphany wines 20 years ago that kind of got me on this rabbit hole of trying to find wines that have authenticity and wines that speak of the land and wines that are always in balance, no matter what Mother Nature gives you from a temperature standpoint and from a sunshine and rain standpoint and a microclimate standpoint. So from the beginning, they have been farming organically. Their motto is organic wines from organic vines, and they are just doing some awesome stuff, have been since the beginning. I believe that I read somewhere that Jeff is the longest tenure winemaker at a winery in Napa Valley currently.
I don't know if that's true. Maybe Elias Schaefer. or Elias from Schaefer. Let's see who else.
Kalini's gone.
Yeah,
Jordan's gone.
they're dropping like flies, so maybe by next year.
I could very comfortably and confidently say it's at least top 5.
Yes, absolutely. And I would say number one, just from a standpoint of crafting amazing wines every year. So Jeff, thank you for joining us, and thank you for what you do. And then I'm just going to kind of let you guys take it away. We've got a photo collage here you can walk us through. And then whenever you're ready to start with the wines, we'll get into Abraxas. All of you at home, you should be into it already, enjoying this beautiful wine that is a great way to start any evening. So guys, take it away, and thank you again for being here.
You go first?
No, you go.
I'm the new guy. I came 2016, so 4 years or so, which has flown by, as a matter of fact. But I came at this from the restaurant side of things, and like Adam was describing, and I would say the most commonly offered up experience with a lot of the Robert Sinskey Vineyards wines is this word epiphany, or this light bulb, right? And that was the same for me. In fact, this wine that we have in glass, Abraxas, this was the one for me. I was in New York. I was a young punk sommelier who thought I had it all figured out, and my opinions were that we're going to change the wine world, that sort of thing. And a sales rep had said, "Hey, I've got a California Alsace blend I'd love to bring to you to taste." And I remember thinking, no thanks. I've got Trimbach, Weinbach, whatever. We're good. And she, being one of the good ones, said, "Look, I won't bug you for 6 months if you don't like this wine. I promise." And she, again, one of those people that you would actually want to bug you, because she was quite good at what she did and was always fair about things. So anyway, we took her up on it. We tasted it, and from that moment forward, this wine has been on every wine list that I have had a hand in. And I swear one of these days I'm going to get a T-shirt that says Abraxas to the rescue, for all the ways that this has bailed us out of tasting menus, those difficult spots in spring where there's all these green vegetables and onions and things like that sommeliers always freak out about. So when I left the restaurant business, I had said to my wife, "Well, I'm not sure what I'm going to do now. We've got a brand new baby. Last thing that I want to do is start selling Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon, and we're in Napa Valley, so I'm not entirely sure what to do here." And she said, "Name 3 places, 3 wineries that you'd want to work." And this was among those 3. And the very next morning, I ran into Rob Sinskey at the farmer's market. He had mentioned he'd been looking to see what was happening with me. We had lunch. That was Saturday. We had lunch on Monday. By Friday, I came in for a tasting. I met this guy. We had actually hosted him for a wine dinner, and the Robert Sinskey Vineyards wines for a wine dinner. So I'd met Jeff, but then sat down with him and talked a little bit. And then maybe 3 days after that, everything was all settled, and I've been here since and very happy to be. There's a lot to love about this place. It's been a light bulb moment for me. And the more and more that I travel around and meet other people around the country, you hear the same sorts of things. And it's absolutely right. It's just quality, but it's different. It's vintage variation, and it's all done with good style.
So this will be my 33rd vintage here. I started in 1988 at Sinsky. Before that, I was at Joseph Phelps, and prior to that, I was at Miacomas. So my first vintage in the Valley was 1984, and I haven't missed a vintage in Napa Valley since 1984. So I feel like the wineries that I had worked at were ones that I really admired and appreciated. If people ask me, how I got interested in wine, I'd probably have to tell you that it was a 73 Miacomas Cabernet. And, dry farm cab. The Chardonnays up there were very, I sort of figured out later, seemingly very Burgundian in style. And so for me, I was more interested in the wines that I appreciated, and worked at the wineries that I thought were doing exceptional things. I had never really intended to be on the winemaking side of business because I have a degree in agribusiness management. I don't have a degree in winemaking. So mine, I always tell people I got my PhD, but it stands for post-hole digger. And just working my way through the cellars of Maya Thomas, Joseph Phelps, and then being here for 30 years and able to, have a lot of a leeway and say in a lot of the programs that we've been doing. The aromatic whites, as Phil was mentioning, are probably a passion for me. When I was working at Joseph Phelps, there was literally, they made 4 or 5 different styles of Riesling. Walter Schug was the original winemaker when Joseph Phelps started somewhere in the early 70s. And of course, being from Geisenheim and with a very steep German accent, you can bet he liked Riesling and Gewürz. And I remember tasting very memorable older wines from Walter Schug. And I would have to say one of those was a 1980 Gewürz that just beautiful acidity. I had it 14 years later, and I thought, wow, you could make wines like this in the Valley. So when Rob approached me about doing aromatic whites, I was jumping at the opportunity to do so because so much of it had been pulled out in lieu of Chardonnay and Cabernet. People don't realize that in the Napa Valley, there was probably more Riesling planted in the early 70s than there was Chardonnay or Cab.
Like almost all of Diamond Mountain.
Right.
And now all Cab.
And then subsequently trying to get the plantings for all of our vineyards, the 2 different styles of Riesling that we have, the Gewürz and the Pinot Gris. It was a real challenge to find those particular clones. That's how much it had changed 20 years later. So the amazing thing about the Abraxas wine to me is how versatile it is with food. And I think, Phil and I were talking about this earlier. What's a wine, you don't know what you're going to have for dinner or go to someone's house, bring the Abraxas with you, because whether you want to save it for the first or second course, or even at the end, or you bring it as the first starter wine, it's going to work.
Holidays are coming up, and that's when it comes to, just think Thanksgiving table or whatever your family cooks, whatever your style is. But inevitably, if you think and you can visualize that table, there's all different kinds of colors, there's all different kinds of textures, all different kinds of flavors. And so, take our wines out of the equation for a moment and just think general wine, right? You really have to operate sort of in the middle of the spectrum because you want something that's going to be versatile so that you don't, anybody can say, choose the mashed potatoes with turkey gravy, choose one wine, you can hit that one on the head. But it's much harder to get a wine that you're going to serve where everything is accommodated. And so you operate in the middle of the spectrum, richer style whites or leaner style reds, both in some grounds of complexity. So now taking it back to these wines, just about everything we're going to taste here fits that. But Abraxas in particular, it has been my Thanksgiving wine for the last 4 years. Specifically, you put this on the table, it looks elegant, it looks beautiful. You have mags that are like this high off the table, which size matters, I suppose, when you're entering a holiday party and everybody's touting their bottles, you bring this big one in. It's just, these wines just work with that sort of style and that sort of cuisine. And so as this time rolls around, they really start to come up as something that we start drinking a lot more of. But oysters, ceviche, all the way up to lamb and big ribeye steaks.
I find them to be relative friendly as well. It bridges the age gap. The comment, "Oh dear, this wine is so lovely. Could I have another glass?" Well, Grandma, you might be falling down soon, so you probably shouldn't have so much. But oh, just another glass. And I think it sort of harkens back to those older wines. 'Maybe not as sweet, because we do like that dry style, but it's a little bit more, a little bit more fruity. And I think it sort of harkens back to those older wines. Maybe not as sweet, because we do like that dry style, but it's a little bit more fruity. but just the aromatics of the wine. I just love Riesling. Like this wine right now, this 15 is really opened up. You get those beautiful characters from the Riesling, you know, those sort of fusel, oily characters. And if you like that, which I do, you know, someone liken it to cilantro, where it's not an aromatic that they like. But if you're into it, I think it just hits on all cylinders. And then as the wine warms up, that Gewürz, that spice from the Gewürz comes in. There's 9% of that in this particular blend. In this blend, it's 45% Riesling. There's 25% Pinot Blanc and 17% Pinot Gris. For you people that are taking notes on such things.
Yeah, I figured since y'all are both talking about Abraxas, we'd just skip ahead and hit Abraxas while it was fresh on your minds. And it is such a beautiful aromatic wine, just as you said, always bone dry, always a little bit different. How often does the blend change? Does it change every year based on what you're getting from the vineyards?
Exactly. And in certain years, maybe we would, 2015 was the fourth year of the drought. So having that crisp Riesling that gets picked later, one of the things that we don't do is we don't put it through malolactic fermentation. So you always have that beautiful malic, that crisp apple acidity in there. And I think that's important. And that's with all of the whites and including the rosé. No malolactic fermentation.
Yep, which we're thankful for.
Yeah.
Preserve that acidity. We sold out of the rosé again like this year, and I'd love for y'all to talk just a little bit. We talked about before everybody got on just a little bit about how you've been affected by the fires this year, and then also let people know kind of what happened in 2017. You were telling me about the Stags Leap District Cab and what's going to happen with that. So while they're talking about that, if you finish your Abraxas, go ahead and pour yourself a little Pinot Blanc, and we'll get back into that. And then also just a word about the vineyard sites that y'all farm. And I know they're kind of spread out. There's some in Napa, there's some in Carneros, there's some in Sonoma. So we'd love to hear a little bit more about the vineyards behind what make these wines amazing.
Yeah, I was just gonna chime in on that before we leave Abraxas, just because as far as whites go, this is the only wine of ours that's single vineyard, and it comes from Cintia. So Jeff and I are standing here at the winery in Stags Leap District, but this, if you think about plantable acres that we farm, owned, and manage ourselves, this is 5 of roughly 172-ish.
Wow.
All the rest is down in Carneros. So it's about, call it 20 miles south of where we are. Significant though, because it sits right on the San Pablo Bay. And so that gives us, if you were to put together a blend of Riesling, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris, and Gewürztraminer from the Stags Leap District, aside from little pockets where you might find some cool air, I don't think it would be delicious. It would be pretty fat and flabby because it's significantly warmer. The other piece about being down by the bay there is that we have a lot of fog that forms when you have cool air coming off the bay, warm air from the valleys colliding, and it just creates a band there. It usually burns off last in the morning and forms first in the afternoons. So it elongates a growing season. And the thing that everybody loves to chase numbers that are really small in terms of alcohol. This vintage 2015 is actually on the lower side at 13.7, but occasionally this will dip above 14. And that's because the grapes are given a long time to be able to ripen. So you get full flavor ripeness. And yes, alcohol comes up because sugars are coming up, but at the same time, because it's happening in that environment, you're not losing acidity either. Alcohol stands out when it has no counterparts around it, just the same as anything would. And this is always a great example of that, because when you pour it for somebody and don't tell them what it is or don't show them what it is and usually ask them what the alcohol is, nobody comes in and says that it's high, because you just don't feel it, because it's part of an overall package that has become nice and ripe. This is also a vineyard where we raise our sheep. So they are winter lawnmowers for us, which obviously cuts out tractors and cuts out emissions. They are sources of food for us as well. Yes, thank you for as I talk about food, pointing out the cutest two little lambs possible. Thanks for that. Well timed.
I, of course, could not put that picture in here when I saw it. Had to see that.
But you know what their names are. That's Little Yummy.
Oh, I was going to say breakfast and dinner. No, we've actually been serving lamb at the winery while somebody has a booklet with one of those pictures in there, and it gets a little bit. Wasn't that one? We ate that one 3 years ago. But it's all part of the idea, right? That on no particular ranch do we devote the entirety of the property to grapes, and that is biodiversity. I mean, monoculture is just not a good thing for the universe. And if you look at Napa Valley, I mean, if you can see what we can see through these windows here, this is a massive sea of monoculture all planted to grapes here. And so, at least for our part, in our ranches, we mix it up and put in different things. And then, of course, we have fun with it. It's all part of the environment, whether it's brought back to the winery and cooked. We make honey from bee colonies, on and on and on.
So from Stag's Leap to Oakville, they always talk about Stag's Leap as having Oakville days and Carneros nights. So that gives you an idea. So being sort of center of the valley here, there's a convection that comes up, and you get those maritime influences that come up through the valley. So in Carneros, it makes sense to plant the aromatic whites there, because what we're really trying to achieve, and through the organics as well, is to reach physiological ripeness at lower potential alcohols. And because, you know, a lot of times if you're in an overly hot situation and the days are hot and the nights stay warm, what you find is you get an elevation of sugars, but you're not advancing with the flavors and the physiological ripeness aspect. So that's been the goal all along, is to sort of moderate that through the organic practices, slow things down, and bring things into quintessential ripeness at potential later picking. And so I think you've proven that. We've proven it out over time. That was sort of the theory for me. And maybe for selfish reasons, going towards the organic model was that I felt that you could do something much greater in a very, I would consider Carneros to be a more leaner soil situation, very low in organic matter. By bringing up and balancing those soils and bringing them in, we could bring a lot more interest into those particular blocks.
It's less than 1% carbon in most places in Carneros.
Less, and this was on virgin ground. The amount of organic matter was less than 1% that we started with.
By the way, he's talking about 1991. So way before it was I was 6. Shit.
Yeah. You know, I had read a book. It was called Entropy into the Greenhouse World. And I thought, you know, if this is really in our future, you know, we break weather records all the time now with heat summation, with amount of rainfall or lack thereof. I thought, if this is really in our future, then what would be the best way to farm? And it intuitively, it was organic farming, because you're allowing each place to reach a balance through the processes of bringing particularly the soil back into balance. And what we find is organic vineyards tend to have more resilience towards eccentric vintages. And so I think after 33 years, I think, well, I won. I proved it. And I feel very fortunate to work with the Sinskys, who've supported it all along and have been huge advocates.
Absolutely. I think it's critical because if you're not manipulating in the winemaking process, then you only have what you have as raw materials to work with. And if your grapes aren't incredible, then your wine's not going to be very good, and you can't fix it because you're committed to not tinkering and manipulating the wines. We do have a question about the change in climate. So kind of tied into what you guys were just talking about. Have you seen the outside of natural disasters, outside of fires, outside of the heat spikes that you just mentioned, are you seeing a change in the actual land, and are you seeing a change in the season of grape growing as we're moving into these different times?
Well, certainly, you know, the seasons, for lack of a better description, I'll call them muddled, because you'll get very warm weather in inopportune times. All of a sudden, December and January are super warm, and we're calling them fall springs now. And you're getting bud swell, and you're freaking out because you're not getting rain. You know, we rely on all of our vineyards. We rely on rainwater, and we collect water through ponds to water the vines. And so if we don't get, you know, at least average rainfall, then we fall well below. In 2015, that was certainly a lower rainfall year. I think it was 60% of normal. And the crop reflects that. It was a much smaller crop. Flavors are intense and great in those vintages, but if you can continue too long into a drought pattern, then you can definitely get into more excessive sort of tannic flavors and things like that. So I've seen it. I tend towards, you know, I know it's sort of controversial for people, but I do believe that they're managing the weather through weather engineering, and I've seen that firsthand, and I've been following it since 2011. And I always encourage people to look, you know, not get on a tirade here, but to go to geoengineeringwatch.org and sort of get information for yourself to decide if this is really happening. Because I know that your weather has changed too, and it's part of that whole model that's going on, where, you know, where we're drying out, you guys might be flooding.
Yeah, since this way, whatever the reason, to give you an example, 2014 was the last vintage which Pinot was grown on the Kappa hillside. So one of the vineyards in Carneros, and that was planted in the early 90s.
93.
Yeah, early 90s, and average daily temperatures at that time supported the idea that Pinot Noir would be ideally suited for that particular hillside. It would be warm, but warmer than some of the southern Carneros vineyards, but would still be appropriate for it. But as temperatures rose and rose and rose, you know, from all the conversations, it was about either picking it too early and not getting full flavor development and having something that's quite green, or these grapes stay on the hillside and they get ripe too much too fast and taste like that really despicable cherry cola California Pinot Noir flavor profile that exists all over the place out there. And so that was pulled and replanted to Primitivo and Zinfandel, which for the 2018 vintage we just tasted. Was it today or yesterday?
Yesterday.
It's delicious. It's delicious.
What blend is that going into, or what wine is that blend going into?
Well, that's the Commander Sinsky, which
Yep.
I feel like we've made about 100 or so cases in each vintage, because it used to come from this tiny little corner of one of our vineyards because Dr. Sinsky really liked Zin.
Yep.
But now since we've done this, 2018 is the first year that we've pulled some fruit off that hillside. So quantity will bump up a little bit and then should go and go and go.
Nice.
Adam, man, you're always very top of the list whenever it comes to anything that is going to leave this winery in small doses. When we get there, just ask.
I've never tasted it before, and I've actually never even seen a bottle before. So I'm all over that. When it's here, let me know.
This is what's going to sound like the greatest oxymoron in wine industry history, is that it's food friendly Zinfandel.
Yep, they exist.
They do.
Yeah.
Zin drinks like Pinot when it's picked early.
Yeah.
I remember at Joseph Phelps, that was some of my favorite wine, was their Alexander Valley Zinfandel from the Demosthenes vineyard. And there was still, you know, it was like 14 or 15 alcohol, but it's still, you know, it had juicy acidity. That's how this one is. It's got great acidity.
Yep.
So it's, you know, it's high alcohol. I think, but the 16 is
15.
It's only 15.3, but
That's not bad.
no, that's low for I picked it under right.
Where's Shall we go to Pinot?
Yeah, let's go to Pinot Blanc.
All right. Handy dandy little half bottles. Great for purses, backpacks, baskets.
It has a glass stopper too, so you don't need an opener.
Tuck it into the side of your boot when you go to the movies. So I hear anyway. Let's take a moment about vintages, okay? Because often people see these and say 2014 or say 2015 for Abraxas, and
we're actually real quick. This slide is wrong. We are on the 2015 for the Pinot Blanc.
2015, yeah.
Yep.
Well, and that's people will look at this and they'll often say like, "Oh, what are you having a hard time selling it?" It's no. White wine, just like red wine. In fact, our reds are behind most of our peers in the market. Bottle conditioning is something that we're big believers in. So it's bottled after about 6 months in tank. The rest of the time between then and now is all time spent in bottle. And again, just giving the wine a chance to settle into itself. It's just grape juice. There's a lot of flavor components that can ultimately come together. We've all tasted wine that is too young, whatever that means. But too young to me just means it hasn't been given that chance to settle in, and it feels very disjointed. It's like you've got a symphony orchestra where you may have really, really talented lead musicians across each section, but if you have no conductor and they're just playing really loudly whatever song they want to think about, it's not going to sound very good. But if you give them some time to figure out each other's, I see Bobby on there, we can make all football references all we want about how teams need to come together. Well, same's true when it comes to wine. If everything's not happening in unison, then you're going to start to feel things out of balance, and that's just no good. And as Jeff was talking about, making these wines with so much acidity, not going through malo, that means that up front, they're generally pretty bracing or they're linear, and ultimately just takes time for complexity to come out. And complexity, therefore, becomes a lot more food versatility, food friendliness. And that's, again, always the goal first and foremost. And you also get some life out of it when you're focusing so much on structure too.
I think, Pinot Blanc, so many people feel like they need to barrel ferment it and put it through ML, and all of a sudden it's not Chardonnay, and it's very delicate. What I found is that the grapes are pretty innocuous on the vine, and if you're waiting for something to happen on the vine, you may be sorely disappointed. But once you get it in the fermenter and you get it fermenting, that's where the aromatics come out. So I think what people sometimes do with Pinot Blanc is pick it too late, too ripe, and then you lose all those subtleties that were there, but you just thought if by waiting you'd see more of them, if that makes any sense. So by picking it at around 21.5% sugar, and making sure that you don't put it through ML, and
Release contact.
Yeah, picking at night, keeping the fruit cool, and keeping the fermentation cool to preserve all the volatile organic compounds, volatile esters, as it were. You end up bottling a lot of stuff that you don't see in a lot of other, even Pinot Blanc from Alsace and such. You don't always see what you see in some of the fruit forward Pinot Blancs here. We've had a lot of good compliments from people that love Alsatian style Pinot Blanc. That it's on all cylinders.
I often talk about this wine as sort of being like the wonderful little love child of Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. It's got a lot of the characteristics a lot of people love about Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay, without the characteristics about Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay you don't love so much. Because there's freshness, there's acidity, there's richness, there's a creaminess, though again, there's no mallow here, but there's a little bit of lees contact. And when it comes to summer fruit salads, and I'm not talking about like Del Monte in a can, but peaches, and throw in a little bit of goat cheese or some sort of rich cheese and fresh greens from the garden, on the money. Take it all the way up to roasted birds. Again, coming back to the Thanksgiving theme. Where's our chicken roaster? Hold on.
Here we go. You can roast chickens in it, and you can wear it as a helmet. Try it.
It's a chicken roaster.
It's awesome.
Look out, incoming, Phil.
I'm going to set that aside and fully sterilize that before we get back to the service, everybody. But it's the wine, again, coming back to versatility. That's kind of our favorite houses. And think cuisine of Alsace. I've got a couple of little kids. So hot dogs are a big thing in our household these days. Hot dogs, sauerkraut, pickles, Pinot Blanc, Abraxas, you name it, it's right there for us. What else do we have there? Ooh,
Shades
blended by
Sounds delicious.
with the final master cuvee.
Yes,
How about
indeed.
that?
I know, these are great. I love the notes. The fried fritters, those are yummy.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Adam, are you frozen?
Yeah, he's got a big smile.
Oh, it looks like it might be. That happens sometimes.
Yeah, some new
At
face.
least it's a nice smile picture.
Might be.
instead of
Can y'all hear me?
embarrassing one.
Yeah,
Am I here?
that was the perfect expression.
Yes.
Be frozen.
Yeah.
Real quick, you've mentioned malolactic fermentation a couple times. For those folks at home who don't know what it is, Jeff, can you give us a real quick explanation of what malolactic is and what it does to white wines?
Of course. So the malolactic fermentation is what's called the secondary fermentation, and it takes the malic acid and turns it into lactic acid, which is it's spatter across the tongue. And so in a lot of cases where you have Alsatian style wines or Rieslings and such, you may want to encourage such things because they have such high acidity. But here, acidity is a little more of a struggle due to the heat, the heat summation. So in choosing to put it through malolactic or not to is a choice in terms of longevity and flavor profile. And for us, though we would, you end up having to filter it to make it complete and not have it go through that process, we feel that in terms of longevity and aging, that's a huge benefit for this style of white wine.
Agreed.
And most California Chardonnays probably have gone through it. When people say they want to have they like a buttery style Chardonnay, that's typically a malolactic fermentation that's delivering you those particular characters. It tends to lend towards viscosity. You see that wine to be almost more syrupy because it can actually lower the level of acidity, total acidity by a gram or more. So,
well, think about the difference between drinking fresh apple juice and drinking a glass of milk, because ultimately behind both of those things, it's a pretty similar conversion to what Jeff's talking about.
And so malate is what you find in pippin apples and apples in general. So you have those nice, like I think of pippin apples because they have very bright acidity, and they're very good for cooking for those reasons. So having that acidity there lends itself to working with food better, I think, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love both of those. This is the first time I've tasted the 15 Pinot Blanc, and I think it's dynamite. Not that I've ever had a Pinot Blanc that hasn't been dynamite, but just the richness and the acidity, all the things that you both mentioned that make it so versatile and so fun and so delicious. So hats off again to another great vintage of the Pinot Blanc. If anybody's interested in getting 1.5 liters of the Pinot Blanc, just let us know and we can bring them in for you for Thanksgiving. But normally we'd sell the 375 milliliters in the store, just because we've seen that they sell a little bit better than the 1.5 liters. But we can always get those for you if you're interested in them. So just let us know.
If you order a 6-pack of Pinot Blanc Magnums from Adam, I'll send you a chicken roaster. Okay.
Nice. We're going to hold you to that.
Not the one I wore as a helmet, I promise. A different one.
A free chicken roaster to any 6-pack purchase of Pinot Blanc Magnums.
Let's go to Pinot Noir.
Okay, Los Carneros Pinot. Well, so I actually printed out the blend sheet for this. This is 10 different clones in here. So I always call this Los Carneros is our large tile mosaic, because it's a mosaic of all of our vineyards. There's 10 clones or selections in there, heirloom and clones, and I'll get into that a little bit. I'm sure there'll be some questions. There's 18 different blocks picked in a 6-week span, and it comes from 6 different vineyard locations. It's 100% grown, produced, and bottled by Robert Sinskey Vineyards. And I looked up the different types of coopers in there. There was 7 different coopers. And so I love our single vineyard Pinots, but I love the sum of the components. And this Los Carneros Pinot is just, well, for lack of a better description, amazing.
It's there's just something delicious about this wine in particular that it's kind of hard to describe, but there's a reason why usually, as much as we were talking about Abraxas and how much we love it, usually if you ask anybody who works here, including the 2 of us, which wine do we take home most often, it's this one. And I remember coming in here and I was impressed by something where a lot of wineries in this valley have this idea of this sort of like reserve tier, all right? So it's like 3 times as expensive, and it's touted as being the best of the best of the best of the best, whatever, right? And I was impressed. First of all, I was thrilled the first time they got invited to go sit in on blending and participate, but I was also impressed by the amount of attention. In fact, this wine, it's the least expensive of all the Pinot Noirs that we make. It's the largest production of all the Pinot Noirs that we make. And yet it's the first wine that gets blended. It's the first wine that's generally set. And it's the wine that, if above any others, is taken more seriously and most seriously. And the idea is, and I remember this, I can't remember if it was you or Rob, but somebody had basically said, well, if it's our largest production wine, it's the one that's going to be representing us the most around the country. We damn well better get it right. And again, they're different. It's not like the 4 Vineyards is lesser quality, just the same as this wouldn't be any lesser quality, but they are very different, and they are blended. Certain percentages of blocks are chosen with specific goals in mind as to how the wine will age, as to how the wine will show in terms of its structure, especially structure and texture. Tension is always a big thing we talk about when we talk about Pinot. But there's a little, it's the Carneros Pinot Noir, I think it sits very nicely. So for those who enjoy Burgundy, for those who enjoy the richest of California Pinots, or whatever you might consider to be a typical California Pinot. I'm not sure that I would call this typical California Pinot if the majority of Pinots around from California would constitute that. But it sits somewhere in the middle. And where it sits, it is just completely comfortable and confident in itself. And it just has this little kiss of delicious sunshine, just in balance with fresh acidity, and with or without food, it's always right there for you. And 750s, we opened up a half bottle. It just manages to situate itself very nicely into any occasion.
So I talked about the coopers. It's in any given vintage, it's about 30% new wood. The thing about wood is that, when you go to a museum and you're looking at paintings, you're not saying, God, that's the most awesome frame I've ever seen. But what that frame does is it draws you into the painting, and perhaps you didn't even notice it. And that's our idea about wood. It's the subtleties of oak that make it interesting. And so I would have to say that we pay for subtlety. I've been working with these coopers for, well, more than 30 years, and sort of have a particular way I'd like the barrels toasted. Certainly, if you want to get smoke taint, you can really heavily toast a barrel and have that in your wine, which is interesting because there's a lot of people that go more towards a heavy toast. I do get a little bit more of a smoky character initially when this was poured, but as it blows off, there's this beautiful red fruit component. There should be earth, there should be spice. And I think one of the big challenges in warmer vintages like 2015 that are drought is having, bright acidity. So what we're trying to pick for is for the red fruit spectrum. We'll save the super plum and major dark fruit colors for the Bordeaux varieties, but this one I always want to see that there's red fruits in there. And this wine, I always say that the difference between a good Pinot and a great Pinot is about 45 minutes. So that's about as long as it takes you to finish the bottle. And then when you're done, it's like, go get another one. And I have to say that there's a lot of frog kissing going on with Pinot, because you basically, you find a Pinot you love and you drink it, and then it's like, I want another one. And then you go through 5 or 6 in your cellar to find that next one, or it might even be more than that. So it's elusive, isn't it? I think it's
heartbreak grape.
It is, because so many people make it, but they're just not quite there.
This is always one too that's a great reflection of vintage. And we might have said it before, but having so much invested in the farming of things, we like vintage variation. It's Adam, you've been following these wines, and a lot of the folks on the call right now, you've been following these wines, and if 2 wines taste the same in successive vintages, it's because the vintages were relatively the same, but for no other reason. And no better example than for those of you who've got experience with 2014, tasting this 2015, and then what you'll taste when we do get there next on the 2016. And that's a good thing. I think that's part of the reason why we've had wine club members who've been with us for 20 plus years or so. It's never the same thing, but it's always delicious. And again, we started with an aromatic white 4-grape blend. We went into a 6-year-old half bottle of, well, at least ours, 5-year-old half bottle of Pinot Blanc. We're now into a 5-year-old bottle of Pinot Noir, and we're going to finish with a Right Bank inspired Bordeaux style blend. I mean, what is it? What's your line? We make wines from A to Z, Abraxas to Zinfandel. I mean, it's like, it's all over the map in terms of these wines. And generally that's a warning sign when it comes to a winery in terms of ADD. And are you going to get this sort of bellwether of mediocrity, but nothing exceptional. But it's quite the opposite, because the common thread that binds everything is this idea and focus on texture, structure, and how it translates to longevity and food friendliness, and really honoring the work that's done in the vineyards when it comes to farming and doing so organically. Here with mushrooms, chicken, duck.
Well, I love your wine so much.
Not necessarily in that order.
Vegetables. Any of them.
I think salmon would be my choice. Although, and duck in this would be absolutely amazing as well.
Yeah.
We want to plan a trip to come out there and have Maria cook for us all at some point in time when things get back to normal, because I hear she's amazing.
Do it. Why wait for normal?
Well, that's a great point. We got to get through O&D at least.
Yeah. Let's clear through this year and regroup and get ourselves going here soon.
Yes, absolutely. We're ready for it. And then to finish off the evening, the beautiful Point of View blend.
What does your label look like? We have. Oh,
We got some.
that's a picking bin from Jeff's first vintage here.
My label looks like that.
I think you've aged better. Yeah, that's the best compliment I've given him in like a year.
Yeah, you're just sore.
The fat sheep is my favorite, personally, always, every time.
Personally,
there it is.
I love
Fat
that.
sheep.
So I wrote some notes down on a napkin if you're wondering what's happening here. I always say that POV is Marcion's little brother. Do you know Marcion? And so as a little brother, it it tries hard and it's always ready. It's fruit forward and lovely. It aspires to be Marcion, and I think in a lot of vintages it's an echo of Marcion. So in this particular vintage, 56% Merlot, 28% Cabernet Franc, and 16% Cabernet Sauvignon. So it can be as high as 80%. As far as how much Merlot or how much Cab or Cab Franc is in there, it just depends on the vintage. So it's typically never, in POV, it's typically never below 50%. But I think this 14 vintage, having the Cab Franc and the Cabernet in there, it was a larger vintage in terms of yield. But this one always is treated, the lots are just part of that particular vintage, very similar to what would be done with the Marcion. 18 months in small French oak barrels. After fermentation, there was 24 blocks I counted in this particular vintage from 4 different vineyards. So, I think everyone planted a bunch of Pinot clones, but Merlot, required a bit of effort. I think so many people malign Merlot for all the wrong reasons. This Merlot has some amazing selections in terms of budwood that was selected from French clones. What we saw early on with Merlot in our Los Amigos vineyard is that it had beautiful bright acidity, but we were looking for more of those mocha and chocolate and deep notes. And so when we planted the vineyards further north, those are some of the clones that we selected. And I spent years, tasting Merlot and selecting clones to plant. And, the amazing thing about planting a clone or selection is you don't know what you're going to get until about 5 or 10 years down the line. And so I think POV is sort of a reflection of all of the things that have gone on here. And I don't know what you all think of this, but I'm really enjoying those particular characters, the mocha, the chocolate.
That's the mocha point is something that I learned from this guy, as a matter of fact, in terms of pyrazines get they get the, I think, ultimately inherently bad rep for being green bell pepper and all these things that you're never supposed to say if you're tasting wine in front of the guy who made it. But with well-resolved pyrazines, with ripe pyrazines that manifest themselves in this form of mocha, and the more and more that I taste these vintages and that we taste these vintages, you can see how that does in fact come. And it's the same thing we've been talking about. Pyrazines are no different than high acidity, is no different than ripeness. It's a component of any grape as it is then going to contribute to the overall product, which is this bottle of wine, right? And again, somebody may not like mocha, and that's not to say that they're wrong for not liking this wine or our manifestation of it. This is such a qualitative thing. Anybody who just takes a sip and waxes poetic about it sort of unilaterally is ultimately missing the point of the fun of all of what we do. But in balance, if you're thinking about it objectively, like in putting together a program that has a little something for everybody and excluding your own personal taste out of it, you can see the way that these things come together, and it's just about proper care. It's about proper treatment, proper farming, and really looking after everything from the beginning stages of that year and that vintage to this point where we're all pulling a cork of a bottle and drinking it together.
And when
afar.
I say a mocha character, I'm not talking, it's the whole Bosco thing. It's just, there's a note of it, and it's well integrated with the fruit and the flavors. and it's something that I like. And for Carneros, where you do on occasion, you'll see more on the sage and olive, that having that sort of mocha character is fun. Also, the other thing is what I've noticed with the organic model is that we're seeing sort of hints of cinnamon, and it's not from the barrel, it's coming from the field. And that's kind of a cool thing. Anytime, like, you know, digressing, going back to the Pinot, anytime I can see violet, I love to see violets in Pinot. And it's not often talked about here, but you do see it in Burgundy. So
yeah. Yeah, I agree with both of those things. Violets are beautiful in Pinot, and mocha is great in red blend. We did have a question about the sheep, and I think just the labels in general. So POV stands for point of view, and the labels change every year, and they're based on photographs of the vineyard. Is that correct?
Correct. So that is the point of view, and I'll let Phil talk about the sheep, because he likes to know about sheep.
They're always, so first of all, as you might have seen, there's 3 different images each year. They do always change, and they're photos that Rob took in each year. There you go. That's 2015.
It is?
Yeah. So
Is that what you have there?
That's 20. So this is a sneak preview. That's 2015. That's 2015.
Nice.
Oh, 3 sheep.
Look at that.
3 times the fun.
3 sheep.
Manny Mo.
That's awesome.
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So they're all photos that Rob took. Generally, they sort of encapsulate animals, vineyard, what's going on behind the doors here in production, just looks at whatever's happening throughout the ecosystem that is what we do. Wine-wise, as Jeff mentioned, it's think about it as point of view, sort of our point of view in farming in Carneros, right? So one of the things that Rob was told back in the late 80s, early 90s about the idea of planting Bordeaux varieties down in Carneros was that it was a completely crazy endeavor. It's not warm enough. You're not going to get the ripeness that's desired, which is still probably true even still today if you're comparing it to the ripeness levels that are achieved up in Calistoga, where you're just getting these huge, big, rich white red wines that are, you know, almost at that point ripened to the point of being homogeneous themselves. But so it's also sort of metaphorically our point of view in farming down in Carneros and the way that you can bring these vineyards together. Because one important point I think too about the vineyards, there are 5 ranches down in Carneros, but they're sort of all over the place, right? And so you have one that is actually butts up against the extreme northern border of Carneros. And when you're thinking Carneros, the more north you get, the warmer you get. So one that comes up right against the northern border, another that is not even 2 miles south, 1.5, and then another 2 miles there. So you've got 3 that are in the northern Carneros. And there, not only is climate different, but it's also more interesting in terms of soil structure, especially that northernmost. It's more, think about it more as foot slopes of Mount Veeder than what you would traditional Carneros down closer to the bay. But then continue further, you have the 3 Amigos vineyards, which is 3 plots that's in that more kind of sandy clay soil, drift just a little bit further to the west, and you're still Carneros, but you're on the Sonoma side of Carneros, and you're there at Cintilla, similar structure, soil structure to what's going on at 3 Amigos, and also similar proximity to the bay, so cooler climate. So, you know, there's a lot of benefit that's gained by the fact that these are not contiguous properties and not contiguous vineyards, because there's a lot of different things that happens. And so I'm certain that if you're a fermented fan or if you're an RSV fan, you probably cook at home. So you understand the concept of mise en place. And when we do blending, and you know, we're talking generally 2 flights of 12, what'd you say? Mise en place, it's my fancy cooking word. We're generally talking about 2 flights of 12 different components that ultimately go into this. As Jeff said, 24 different blocks, 24 individual tastes of wines that ultimately get assembled in some sort of mix of percentages, with the idea being that as delicious as all of those blocks are on their own, if we play our cards right, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and we blend them together in complementary ways to create this. And so that's sort of Probably a very long-winded way of talking about the metaphor.
Yeah, I don't know. You sort of drifted off the sheep.
Really?
Yeah. You asked about the sheep, and then
That was diverting.
Vandal Vineyard Cab. There's no Cab Franc or Cabernet planted south of Vandal Vineyard. So as you move more towards maritime influences, you'll get greener Pyrazines. I'm reminded of a lot of the blocks that Buena Vista had, well, even south of us, that were, when you start getting into the artichoke and asparagus. So we felt like having Cab Franc planted there in those locations were great because it's more of a South Napa. There's red volcanics. The delineation between that northern edge of Carneros is Mount Veeder at about 400 feet. That's where you go into the Mount Veeder appellation. Having the sheep, because Rudolf Steiner said it best, in order to have an integrated farming system, you need to have the animal element involved as well. And so by having the animal element there, having the sheep grazing, they keep their heads down and they do what they do, they fertilize as they go. It helps to improve the soil. The type of fertilizer that they're producing is a slow release encapsulated form, as you probably guessed. And then they move forward. And so by having the sheep, it completes that integration of that Rudolf Steiner theory, because as you know, we do in practice the biodynamic practices. So that's an important part of the farming system. So because we're in a monoculture, we have to do what we can to create the diversity out in the field. And so cover cropping and having the sheep come in and graze those cover crops means that if you ever come here for dinner, you'll be getting some really delicious sheep.
It's the best lamb I've ever tasted. The best. It's happy lamb.
Yes.
Well fed. It's delicious.
And I see that you could pair this with vegetable cassoulet, but I like the the weenies and bean cassoulet too. It's pretty good. A little duck confit. It's pretty yummy.
Uh-huh.
And I can say that if you want something really yummy, you take a bottle of this and you go to Bistro Gentil in Yountville.
We do a straight Cab Franc, Ted and Bridget. It is one that, like the Merlot that I was talking about, it's very small production. I think we make 400 or 500 cases of it each year.
In fact, we'll be bottling the 2018 next week. 500 cases.
Nice. And is that one that we will ever see in the state of Georgia, or do they have to get it directly from you guys?
If you ask Adam, I will say yes.
I love that answer. Bobby, it looks like we need some Cab Franc and some Commander Sinsky coming our way soon.
Yeah, Commander Sinsky.
I didn't make the same categorical guarantee on Commander Sinsky. You got to wait at least until 2018 comes around.
Super.
I'll take that answer. Well, you guys know that we would love to feature as many of your wines as possible in our store. We have since we opened up. Some sell better than others and some are more popular than others, but we've loved having the entire line in the last 2.5 years. And we would love to see some special things come our way as well. So we'll start talking about that on back channels as needed. And it is that time, the difficult time, to decide on what your favorite wine was from the wine tasting. I just want to say thanks again to Jeff and Phil for taking the time to hang out with us. We love what you guys are doing. Keep it up. You're doing it in a place that doesn't have very many champions of authentic terroir-driven wines that are farmed responsibly. And so we really, really appreciate your approach, your philosophy, your ethos, and we love supporting you guys. All right, so I'm going to check. I got chats blowing up here. We're going to
let me just jump in, because
Yeah, absolutely.
this is perhaps the best compliment that we could receive, is that the first 4 votes, number 2, number 1, number 3, and then shortly below that, 2 votes for POV. So, and this is what's cool.
It's a 4-way tie.
This is, well, no. This is what's cool about, and why we appreciate it, and why I would not be saying yes to these things for anybody other than folks like Adam who really do this, because these wines are not necessarily singularly set. And so you go in one night, you get a bottle of Pinot Noir, you go in the next night, you might be having something for dinner that's different, you get a bottle of POV, and then it's just you at home and some sort of fried fish, you get a half bottle of Pinot Blanc, whatever it may be. That's what's cool about what Adam does. And I know it's not just us as a producer, it's other great producers. You will never find a couple of guys who are more wine curious about other things that other people are doing in the Valley, in this country, or other New World, or especially Old World as well. And it's appreciated on our end, Adam, that you carry as much as you do. But I know it's also appreciated, and it's cool from a customer perspective, because you don't just have a shop that's just your source for Carneros Pinot. You can go to the same place and get this, and then also take that into other delicious wines that are on Adam's shelves who practice similar principles that we do too. And for that, I say thank you there, Adam.
And thank you, Phil. That is the best compliment that I could get as a purveyor of fine wines. So thank you guys for everything you do for us, and for everything you're doing there in the Valley. And I'm having trouble. I'm trying to tally up these votes, but my mouse doesn't want to cooperate with me.
While you tally, Jim, what's up, Jim? Yeah, okay. Oh, how is this year's crop? All right. This year's crop is tiny. In fact, we made a decision back in late April that we were going to sit this harvest out. So we actually, while these grapes were small enough that you could just pop them off with your fingers, we did that on every vineyard except for Kappa. We looked at a pandemic that was not going to do us any favors in terms of inventory depletion. We looked at a mega drought and realized that water would be in scarce supply. And we also looked at the idea that fire would be a major risk to start early and happen often throughout this year. And we felt like if we didn't make some big decisions to be able to combat some big hardships that came out our way this year, that we would end up paying for it. And so we took a bit of a risk here, knowing that we have the inventory to cover, but felt the most appropriate decision to make sure that we would withstand 2020 and live to harvest and farm another year, and several more after, would be to just call it conservative. So we did that, and that's probably why the two of us still have any hair whatsoever, considering how fires just damaged this year's crop and how there's not going to be much of a 2020 vintage from Napa Valley, period. But for us, we got in 3 blocks of Pinot for Rosé, and we had them in tank the day that the Hennessy fire started in August, and that was it. We lost some Zinfandel that was on a hillside, but we fared pretty well this year relative to the rest of the Valley, and this is just it's a tough year when it comes to a lot of our pals and where everybody's feeling when it comes to, forget about COVID, just set that aside, but the way the fires are going to impact this Valley. It's the best form of support that anybody can offer is to just drink more from everybody around in the Napa Valley, and you're going to be doing everybody that's here a big favor to help us all get through.
Cheers. Yeah, we hate it. Our hearts go out to everybody. I know Jeff mentioned when we were talking before everybody got on that he knows 7 people that lost homes during these fires, and so it's beyond just the wineries, but it's personal friends, it's people's houses and livelihoods and everything else on top of already a difficult year. So do everything that you can to support Napa. Do everything that you can to support California.
That I had congestive heart failure in March, and it was a congenital heart defect that I wasn't aware of. So I was out for 3 months.
Wow.
Blessing from that. And so, I mean, timing wise, I mean, no one, it was just surreal. This whole year has been super surreal for me. So, and then the fires in August, starting in early August. I mean, by October, we're typically, at least 2/3 through our harvest. So to have the fires fall in August, there's a lot of people that, really experienced a hardship with this fire. So, so in the end, as bad as it is, or was, or is being, it's still, there's always something good that's happening. And so, and I think wine is part of that.
Resilience.
Yep.
A little wine gladdens the heart. So
absolutely it does. And Jeff, you look pretty amazing for having a heart failure in March. Recovered there, sir.
It's funny because I was out of breath and slowly not understanding, and then thinking, because I got a virus in early December, the virus, that it was some respiratory thing, but and it turns out it was like a heart defect. It was something I was born with that finally just caught up with me. And I was surprised to see that they didn't find any, Western bacon cheeseburger in my arteries. They were all clean. So that's, that's a testament to drinking red wine and stuff. I'm sure they thought that they were going to find something. They said, "Oh no, your arteries are all clean. It's, it's just this particular valve that's broken." So here I am. I'm back to tell the tale.
We're glad.
They put a cow valve in. Not old man. I hope it was a 2-year-old heifer, that Rudolf Steiner would have approved of, right? But I doubt it. I don't know where they get those particular things. That's something I should look up. Maybe some of you in the crowd could do some research and find out where those heart valves come from.
Crowdsource your cow heart valve.
Yeah.
The fires are 95% contained as of the last I heard. So this particular one really represents very little threat, though we are, as we speak right now, in the middle of another red flag warning that is supposed to last until Friday.
So we have a red flag, and it's quite warm. I think it's probably, it's 5:15 our time here, and it's around 90 degrees.
And windy. That's the problem. So send some good juju out here, because we're not out of the woods yet. Fire season really lasts until like mid-November.
Yeah.
And actually this would be the beginning of fire season, or thereabouts. The 2017 fire, for instance, hit on my wife's birthday. It was October 8th. So, we got a ways to go before we're fully out of the woods. And the state, it's just a big tinderbox. I started 2 small fires. I was just grinding down a fence post on my uncle's garden retaining wall. Fortunately, I was doing it with the charged hose right next to me, so I put him right out. But again, nothing substantially out of the ordinary, but everything is just so hot and dry. Can you talk a little bit about Orgeat, Jeff?
Oh, well, sure. So Pinot Gris, I was rather against this beverage initially, because a lot of the orange wines I had tasted tended to be, maybe someone had forgotten something in the cellar, and they were very high in volatility and not necessarily that enjoyable as food worthy. So when they said we want to do an orange style wine, I thought, okay, well, we'll make it with Sinsky sensibility. So there's typically, in any given vintage, there's about 30% skin contact on that, and it goes full term on skins through fermentation. But I make it more in a white wine style, so there is some night picked. All the fruit is night picked, and it's there's a little bit of barrel fermentation in there, but it's net neutral wood wise. So what you should experience in that Orgeat is you definitely get the essence of the skin contact. It has that firmness of tannin. but there's also a lovely sort of fruit behind it that carries it through. And we did less of the volatility in that wine. So I'm the person that asked the question, do you enjoy it?
They love it.
Awesome.
It's been one of the favorites in the shop, and they've actually the Daws have turned on all of their friends to the Orgeat as well. So we've got quite a little following, as Ben just commented as well. Yeah, it's a fun little one. I fell in love with it out at the winery. I think the first release that y'all acid tap. There's not really any acid on it, but
it's been a work. Yeah, it's been a work in progress. Just sort of fine tuning the level of skin contact in there, and I think it's the latest version, 15. Yeah, 15. I think you'll find the 16 to be. Well, I prefer the 16. I think it shows a little brighter, but still has that nice, for lack of a better description, linearity of the 10.
Yeah, it's an orange style wine that you can put in a glass without food. Just drink a glass of it, enjoy it, share a bottle of it, and not need to think too hard to still get some delicious little pleasure out of it.
And then does everyone recognize that label?
It's a great social test.
All right.
Uh-huh.
Know what it is? Who knows what it is? I see that gentleman shaking his head, raises his hand. Yeah. Did you ever have any? I never saw any. There was only Green Dragon and such when I was growing up.
Well, we finally tabulated the tally, and Pinot Noir is the winner. Abraxas came in second, followed by the Pinot Blanc and the POV. No surprise there to me. Those are always the favorites in the store in that order. And I think as we're getting into the cooler weather, we'll see an increase in the POV sales. We usually do around Thanksgiving in December. I did have a question from Ted, wondering if there are any resources or sites available to help people who have been affected by the wildfires as far as wineries. Other than just purchasing wine, is there any other way that our friends can help as they have the means?
Well, that's awfully nice, and I'm not aware of any presently, so we should look into that for you and get back to you.
Yeah, 2017 being the most direct example in Napa, they ended up putting out a special division within the Red Cross that went specifically to fire relief. I would expect that they would do something similar. Red Cross is always a good place to start because they distribute where it's needed, whether it's CAL FIRE or, I mean, there's a lot of people who can certainly use it, and Red Cross does a pretty good job about distributing equitably. Thank you.
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap up this tasting. This is Facebook and Instagram. I would suggest that you follow them. Again, join the wine club because you can get wines that we don't get in the state of Georgia. If you're not familiar with the 3-tier distribution law, we can only buy what the distributor has available from Robert Sinskey. We can't just purchase directly from them. So a lot of these wines are so small production that we never see them in our retail market, but you can get them directly from Robert Sinskey. And I anticipate that probably over the next few months to the next couple years, we'll start seeing maybe some library releases from them as there is no 2020 vintage being produced currently, but that's just my gut. And Phil and Jeff will obviously be able to tell you more about that, and hopefully we'll see some back vintages coming to Georgia at some point in time as well, because that would be pretty cool. So follow them, join the wine club, go out and visit them when you have a chance. It is my favorite Napa Valley winery to visit, hands down. And if I only had one winery in California to visit, it would be Robert Sinskey. They're awesome. So, guys, thank you again for everything. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for spending the time with us. Thank you, all of our friends who have joined us on this Zoom tasting and all of the other Zoom tastings that we've done during COVID. Just a reminder, next week we are taking off in anticipation of baby Ezra Keith Danielson's birth. And then we'll resume things the week of Halloween with orange wines. So guys, thank you. And everybody have an awesome night. Happy Wednesday.
Hey, as always, thanks to you all for doing this. If you don't do this, we don't get to do it, and we certainly don't get to call this work. And for that, we are grateful. Adam, Bobby, Lee, Vivian, mwah, mwah. Miss you guys. Golly, I can't wait to get back to see you on your turf.
Us too, man. Us too. We look forward to the day.
So long,
everybody. Guys. Have a great night, everybody.
Sinsky out.
Sinsky out.